Hello, world news mainly from the US today. We'll start with FDIC and their statistics at a glance. FDIC insures the deposits in banking institutions, that outfit, and tidies up when everything goes wrong. Commercial banks at the moment, 2011, there are about 6,000 some of those. But if we go back to the start of the statistics here for FDIC, in 1990 there were 12,000. There were twice as many commercial banks in 1990 than there are today. And if you look just below that, new charters, there's been one new charter this year and 9 last year. They're not exactly starting up new commercial banks hand over fist. Next is savings institutions, slightly different in setup, just over 1,000 now, when in 1990 there were 2,800, well over twice as many. And again, new charters, none so far this year, 2 last year and 6 the year before, 9 the year before that, again not starting up new savings institutions. Problem institutions, it is at 888 of the 6,000 at the moment. If you add this 6,000 to the 1,000, you get about 8,000. So about 10% of the commercial bank savings institutions are labelled as problem institutions by FDIC at the moment. But if you go back to 1990, there were 1,500 problem institutions, and of course that was because it was in the middle or coming towards the end of the savings and loan crisis, which had knock-on effects for commercial banks and other savings institutions. So 1,500 in 1990, but by 1997 it was back down into double figures, with only 92 in 1997 problem institutions, and there it wobbled around 100, even lower on sometimes, till this financial crisis hit. And you can see 2007 there were only 76, but then 252 turned to 700, 800, and heading up for 900 there are now. That's it. Commercial risk, calculated risk. Blog has an unofficial problem bank list with over 1,000 in the list, starting with First Commerce, First Commonwealth, before it gets onto the A's of Abacus, Academy, Access, Advantage, etc. So if you want to check to see if your bank is in the calculated risk of unofficial banks at risk of, you can check through the 1,000 that are there. New York Times, Gretchen Morgensen, who is capable of writing some good stuff, but seems to mix in some absolute tripe with it. It's frustrating. This weekend was the banks still want a waiver for their naughtiness. How should banks atone for those foreclosure abuses? All the robo-signing and shoddy record keeping that jettisoned so many people from their homes, which is a shocking way to start the article, because people's minds will be spinning in the mud over the problem of was it robo-signing and shoddy record keeping that did jettison so many people from their homes, and won't be able to get into the meat of the article, which is well worth dining upon. This is obviously to do with the banks and the attorneys general, and the banks are trying to pay off their past misdemeanors by 20 billion, which would be it's a lot of money, but they wouldn't mind getting away with that. I don't need to read it all. Let's go to the bottom. A looming issue relates to the potential liability stemming from Mortgage Electronic Registry System, that's MARES. This company, owned by the major banks, was set up in the mid-1990s by the Mortgage Bankers Association, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Its goal was to expedite the home loan process. It expedited or circumvented the law. I mean, it did what it did and became legal because it became done on a mass scale, but it became accepted but never legal. But the mayor, later in the article, but the mayor's machine started to sputter during the foreclosure crisis. Lawyers challenged mayors' ability to bring foreclosure proceedings because the system does not technically own the security. He's selling on these securitized mortgage-backed securities. Mayors doesn't own that part of it, or the note underlying the property. The actual mortgage note is not held by mayors either. And it's required that whoever is foreclosing should have, preferably, the note. While some courts have not objected to mayors foreclosing in place of banks, others have. New York courts, for instance, have been increasingly hostile to mayors. In a February 2011 opinion, Robert E. Grossman, a federal judge in Long Island, wrote, "No, this court does not accept the argument that because mayors..." I'll do it in normal voice. This court does not accept the argument that because mayors may be involved with 50% of all residential mortgages in the country, that is reason enough for this court to turn a blind eye to the fact that this process does not comply with the law. Equally troubling for mayors is the fact that its officials have filed questionable documents with courts attesting to ownership of the notes and other significant matters, which they didn't have, and they've been very, very naughty. And if they can get away with 20 billion, they're getting away light, because like in the savings and loan, where thousands, I think, of bankers did actually go to jail, nobody has been sent to jail for any of the misdemeanors in the whole of this economic crisis. And just paying money is not real restitution. You want people doing the old perp walk to really serve as the law should be served. Something like that. New York Times again, home sales fall 0.8%, third drop in 3 months. Washington, fewer people bought previously owned homes in June, a private group said Wednesday, putting this year on pace to be the worst for sales since the housing bust. Ain't getting no better, kids. Later in the article, says that bigger down payments, tougher lending rules, higher debt, just generally out there, and shortage of desirable starter homes are deterring many would-be buyers. Even some people with good credit and enough money for a down payment are delaying because they are worried that prices will keep falling. It all goes back to uncertainty about the future and hiring, says Jennifer somebody or other who works somewhere or other. It all goes back to uncertainty about the future and hiring. Jobs. Speaking of jobs, calculated risk again. Men and women and their participation rate. Going back to 1948, there's participating in the working economy, and the pink one for the girls has come from 33% participation rate to nearly 80%, 75% by the end of the year. 50 years of rising participation by the girls in pink there, and it's gone flat with a little turn down for this recession or soft patch. The boys up near 100%, and it's just been coming down very gradually to just under 90% now. So how's that broken up? Another calculated risk chart. Let's start at the bottom with the old people, 55 and over. It used to be 40%, dropped down to 30% in the 80s, early 90s, early retirement, I suppose. They could afford it. They'd done well, or whatever it was the reasoning, but it's back up to 40% again. The oldies are staying in the economy longer. Maybe that's the reason for the red line, which is 16 to 19. Used to be up over 50% would be participating, but that's dropped down now to nearly 30%. Maybe it's the old people flicking boigers and taking the jobs from the 16 to 19-year-olds. The shitty brown line is 20 to 24, which has been dropping for the last 15 years. And the general adults in the population has been basically flat to just about going down. But strangely, are all the younger people going to college now or something, 16 to 19? That's a real come down, isn't it, from 50 down to nearly 30. And the oldsters going back in or staying in work. Right, let's stick with calculated risk and finish with this. How is the government doing out of all this movement in employment? And these are the US government receipts as a percentage of GDP, money coming into the government. And this goes back all the way to 1946, so this is long-term stuff. Blue at the top is individual income taxes, which is the biggest one going into the federal coffers. And moving backwards from where it is now, the little turn up at the end looks good, that's hopeful. The spike before that is housing. The spike before that is the run up into the dot-com crash, the advent of computers and all sorts of nice new jobs being found there, and that took it all the way up to 10% of GDP paid in income taxes. But now it's crashed down to just over 6. That's where the government is short of an awful lot of spending money. Purple will do next thing, that's next. Off-budget social insurance, that's payroll taxes, isn't it? Yeah, payroll taxes. Strangely down at the moment. You'd think individual income taxes would be going in the same direction as payroll taxes, but that maybe they're not quite up to date yet, but you can see that drop off during the recession. So presumably that will turn up again as unemployment turns up. Red line going down is corporation income tax. It was 6% of GDP in the 50s, early 50s, but you can see it came down all the way down to 1% of GDP in the early 80s, in that recession there where the government was making things easier for corporations so they can go out and hire people. And it really, it had a little stab in the dot-com, getting over, well, nearly to 3%, but it's crashed back down again towards 1% of GDP. Excise taxes and other excise taxes probably aren't worth bringing in at the moment. Probably takes more money to bring them in than anything else. Other included there, noted in the article, says that estate taxes are in there at other, and they so you can see it's come down from 4% in 1946 at the beginning of the chart down to 1%. So there's a lot of money that's been foregone by the federal government, either in excise taxes due to this world open market that we've got now, and you don't tax incoming stuff, but they've lost a lot in estate taxes as well, which aren't as heavily taxed. And that's about it, because I'm not sure what on-budget social tax insurance is. But basically, income taxes, payroll taxes, corporation taxes, all taxes are down. And unless you can, this budget discussion that's going on, unless you're going to play the MMT defence, I don't know how you play a defence on this. Because the attack is no money, no spendy. And the United States federal government seems to go heavily in for this spendy stuff. So if you spendy, you'll have to, somewhere along the line, some of these colourful lines are going to have to start pointing upwards again. Pays your money, you takes your choice, but if you don't pay your money, you run out of choices. See you tomorrow. Bye.